Everybody. I would now like to welcome Dr. Julie Bayley from University of Lincoln, and she's really one of the leading people on developing, for example, the toolkit and impact, but now provides a provides a talk about impact literacy within research. So I'll just hand over directly to you, and if there's anything to add, Julie, then please do so. So if you want to share your slides.
Yeah, thank you very much. Let me just share these to you. Sorry, I'm working on a single laptop, so I hope you can see those slides. Is that okay?
Yes, it's good.
Fantastic.
Thank you.
Well, delighted to be with you today. I was reflecting on the agenda, and it's really interesting. We've got kind of 3 talks. There's 3 complementary lenses on the sector, I think. Mark's talk was very much at the kind of clinical research interface and absolutely fascinating with the young people engagement and looking at the barriers and so forth. And Claire and Candice will come in later around NIHR and structure. My lens on this comes from very much working within the academic research sector. I'm a researcher, but I'm also director of impact. So it's kind of research management within a university type lens. And I'm aware that's not the same lens everyone else will share, but I think if we put those 3 talks together, actually we get a really good overview of some of the issues within impact. And what I want to talk to you today is about impact literacy. And I'll talk about what that is in a minute, but it's really this kind of way of thinking about impact, which can guide us to do impact healthily, can do it in a way that's meaningful to people, and can avoid some of the kind of navel gazing you can sometimes get in academia, where it's all about kind of papers and so forth. So not a criticism of what we do in the sector, but also a call to try and do things in a slightly different way. So I always start any talk with the same few slides just to get us on the same hymn sheet. So apologies, you may well know all this already, but I always like to add it as a refresher. So certainly when I'm talking about impact and impact within the research domain, it's this provable effects or benefits of research in the real world. And real world in this instance is not within the academic bubble. It's not, academics kind of patting themselves on the back. It's where real patients, clinicians, the environment, culture, whatever benefits in some way. And I should add that although I'm a health psychologist and my research is health focused, my remit covers all topic areas. So there'll be kind of a generic flavoring across some of this. So when we're talking about impact, this is what we're talking about, real benefits in the real world. And impact is basically change. It's we do research, and in some way it changes, contributes to, makes a difference to the world. That might be direct, it might take years, it might be, there's all sorts of different dynamics in there, but that's what it is, and it's change. And if you think about, and what I'd really urge you to do in this session is think about your own part of this journey. What is it you bring to these things, and what do you want impact to look like? So I've said here, impact could be considered a kind of an improvement in something. So for example, things becoming more efficient or effective, or patient well-being going up, more access to things. Anything going up is an impact. Equally, it could be a reduction in something. So, reducing mortality, reducing waste, reducing staff stress, etc. If our research can contribute to those things, then we're in the realms of impact. It's also really important to remember that stopping something is a type of impact. So typically I see this more in the heritage sector, but there are health crossovers. So if we do research to steady something or to stop something bad continuing, so for example, if there were an untested treatment and our research proved that it was dangerous and we stopped it, that would be an impact. That's stopping of an intervention. But we can also have things like stopping deterioration. So in the heritage sector, we see this in things like in conservation. We're not going to improve the heritage we've got, but we can preserve it. We can stop it deteriorating. And you might typically see that in health in some of our kind of conditions where deterioration is at its heart. So, kind of dementia, Alzheimer's, etc., might be about just halting that progression. I say that as a dementia carer. I know there's kind of an inevitability of what's going to happen, but to see that decline in the most dignified and safest way possible would be my impact that I would like for my family. So impact, is it something going up, going down, or steadying? And if you can answer that, you're in the realms of impact. And crucially, it's not these things. It's not the kind of circulating things we have in academia, the dissemination, academic interest, reputation, keynotes, those kind of things. To be clear, dissemination is absolutely vital for impact. We can't get the research messages out without disseminating and communicating. It's just not in itself a change. Patients don't benefit by us writing papers. Patients benefit by us doing the research, which is communicated and used. And it's that mindset that we need to get into. So anything that is a marker of an academic's kind of, reputation, fabulous for the academic, just not impact in the way we need it to be considered. Okay, so that's kind of the headlines. I just want to start us off with that. And I also want to give you a quick summary of some of the dynamics within the UK academic research impact context. I know we're talking about impact within the kind of NIHR bands. However, for many of us working in universities, some of these things are quite powerful drivers of what we do. We have, as researchers, various requirements from funders. So NIHR is most certainly one of them, but many of our funders say, as you go on to do this research, it needs to have impact, it needs to have benefit. What does that look like? And we have to put in some kind of impact plan. Different funders kind of measure that differently, but essentially we need to know from the outset, where could this go? And we can only know that by speaking with people, by speaking with stakeholders, patients, clinicians, etc. And the sector is definitely getting better at that. I think there's still more work we can do. For those of us within the university setting, the Research Excellence Framework, or REF, has been incredibly dominant for the last few years, and many of you on this call will have either been involved or have been offering evidence for academics. There's all sorts of ways you might have been involved, but it's a kind of 7-ish yearly assessment cycle of our research excellence, which includes our impact, the scores of which determine how much money we get from the government in a block grant, bluntly put. The results of that came out last week, so it's very raw for many academics, but what you will see from that is a suite of impact case studies. We have them from 2014, we now have them we will have them from this cycle, where you can see just what amazing stuff colleagues are doing in the impact space, and I urge you to look at them. I have a caveat on that later, but I urge you to look at them. Related to that, we have things like the knowledge exchange framework, which I won't go in, but is essentially a requirement for institutions to show the contribution they make to their region, local economy, community, etc. The way in which the institution exchanges knowledge with its surroundings. But if you take those things out, we also have basic things like our institutional mission. Who are we as an institution? Lincoln, where I'm based, expresses itself as a permeable institution, a civic institution, a university for its region. And so we deliver our impact with that in mind. And those missions vary. So I'd certainly urge you to say, have a look at the institution in which you're working. What's its mission? What does it say it wants to make a difference in? Because that's where the impact points. For many of us, impact is purpose. And Rebecca said in her opening Impact Champions talk about, this is about making a difference. And I think there's an immense privilege in academia and in research, notwithstanding the pressures and the workloads and all of that. We won't, let's not go into because we need gin. But all of that stuff, we have such a privilege to try and make a difference somehow. And for many of us, that's the guiding force, irrespective of everything else. So as soon as we've got those kind of things in our heads and we think about things like sustainable development goals, kind of big international goals for, improving things like poverty, food hunger, etc., we've got this suite of reasons why impact has become so important. And for many of us, it always should have been important, whether you think the balance of those things is right or not. So that's just a flavour of how it feels to do impact within this landscape. Now, this talk is titled Impact Literacy. And at this point, I'm just going to shift into explaining what that is. And I'm going to kind of, do all of these slides in kind of general terms to give you food for thought, really, on how you could bring this into your areas. So several years ago, myself and a colleague, David Phipps in Canada, if you haven't seen him, go find him on Twitter. He's the head of Research Impact Canada. He is an absolute guru of knowledge mobilization. And long story short, he and I worked together and we're discussing how impact features in different countries. And we reasoned that the assessment dominance we tend to have in the UK makes us very focused on what impact have you had? What impact will you go on to do? What? In Canada, they talk about the how. So in their funding, they have to show what engagement they're going to do. They don't have to measure it at the end. Now, if you put those together, you've got much more of a bigger picture, whether you're assessment driven or kind of mission driven. But what was always missing from all of that was the who. Who are the people? Because impact is about people. Research doesn't have its own life force. Research is energized by people, it's designed by people, it's put into place by people. And kind of ignoring the who takes out one of the most powerful parts of this whole story. So impact literacy is a statement of all of that. It says to do impact well and to do impact meaningfully, you have to have a handle on those three things: the what impact, the how you're going to do it, and the who needs to be involved. And the who is everyone from the people who kind of come up with the need through to the people that evaluate it and the researchers, everyone. It's like kind of all the players on the field. So what I've put on the side there is a link to a workbook, and I can happily tweet this out as well, but a workbook that talks you through some of these things. And there's other materials as well. But I just want you to lock into your head that kind of three-part bit of thinking. Now, as soon as I've said lock in the three-part, I'm going to change it a bit. That still stands, but we carried on working in the sector and realized that the model in itself, whilst it made sense, needed to land in a slightly different way. And the thinking that we were doing training and all sorts of things, and we kept coming back to the same problems. And this model is the kind of result of us turning those into a new model. Let me explain. One of the things we found consistently was that people weren't starting with the right question, which is, why do we need to do impact on this? Why is impact needed? And that's not a suggestion it's not needed. It's just that they weren't asking people, they were assuming. From an academic vantage point, assuming what was needed rather than going to speak to people. So we put why at the bottom of that. And for some people, I still hear people saying, I'm doing it because I need a ref case study. Okay, that might be practically true, but we need to put people's lives at the heart of this. So that's why is added at the bottom. We also found that people were doing incredibly well in impact. They were building their skill sets, becoming knowledgeable, becoming really, really good. But their institutions were kind of still not really playing the game, or they were just letting it happen, but weren't supporting it, weren't driving it. So we added this second line, which is up the left-hand side, which says organizational literacy, that says for individuals to have the effects they want, to put that literacy into place, the institution also needs to up its game and become literate. So that's the second change. The third change is you will see there are three levels. The bottom is the kind of basic literacy, I suppose we'd call it, where people are aware, the institution is supportive. It's happening, but it's not really happening any kind of really critically engaged way. As people become better at it, and as institutions put in more infrastructure, resources, strategy, etc., we start going up the tree until towards the top. And the kind of optimum is where you've got critically thinking, engaged, skilled, expert impact people, be that academics, research managers, whatever, but this kind of critical expertise with an institution that is supporting that, being driven, driving the agendas and doing it in a healthy way. So this model, and I wanted to talk through it so you could think about it in your own institution, is a reflection of how we can build in literacy, not just to ourselves, but to the environment in which we work. So as I'm thinking about all of those things, I wanted to point to a couple of examples of where some of this comes into play in the sector, and particularly with NIHR. So Jörg's already mentioned a couple of things. All of that stuff I've just said is essentially impact good practice and meaningful practice around impact. And I've been really, really lucky to work with NIHR, particularly Claire and Candice in recent years, to develop some resources, tools and so forth. And I offer them here just to let you know about them, but also to kind of fly the flag for working in partnership, because impact is a team sport. We all bring something to the party. So this is kind of what some of it looks like. So one of the first things we did about 18 months ago, I think now, maybe a bit longer, was look at what tools are already available. There is so much good stuff out there in the impact space. What can be challenging is for people to know where to start. So what we did was a kind of a trawl of what were freely available toolkits or easily available toolkits, and curated them into a kind of dashboard. So if people need to go and do impact, they can go into here and kind of find some frameworks that might help them. There's not a gold standard one, there's not a better, worse one, it's which one fits your purpose. And this is on the NIHR's kind of learning platform, and there's a PDF as well. We can go into that if you want, but just so you know it exists. And this is kind of what it looks like. We have a load of tools down the side. I think there's 44 tools in total, and you can pick based on whether you're trying to plan impact, kind of deliver it, or evaluate impact, and it gives you some sense of what it's best suited to. Some of them come from health, some come from elsewhere, but it's a kind of walkthrough of how you could use things. And just to give you a quick sense of what one of those records look like, if you pick one of those toolkits, you would find something like this that has the summary of it, some strengths and limitations, and how it could be applied. So it's really a kind of a way to help people navigate themselves meaningfully to the thing they can use, not saying this is the thing to use, because that would be essentially arrogant at this point, because we don't know what's better or worse, and a lot of it is crosses over. There's some amazing stuff in there, so have a look. The second thing I want to mention, which is I know is kind of in the engine room of NIHR about how to use all of this, but just to give you the sense of what this thing is. If you think about impact within our research space, so not the benefits of research, but how it operates within our research space, it is conceived of by researchers in conversation with other people. It is delivered by researchers in combination with other people, and then there are beneficiaries. But there are these points of decision making along that journey, and one of those is how funding review panels judge impact plans. And if funding reviewers are kind of wildly different in what they're looking at, how can we tell if that's different lenses on the same thing or just different ways of thinking about it? And unless we kind of somehow harmonize the way they're looking at it, not the judgments they're making, but the way they're looking at it, we're going to just keep churning out things that may not be quite the most powerful way to do impact. So what we did here was a load of interviews and talking to a lot of people involved in reviewing an NIHR, and looked at what some of the challenges are. Now, many of the people we spoke to are excellent, so this is not a suggestion that they're not. Actually, what they were doing is sharing with us their insights into what good looks like and what maybe newer reviewers may need, or what, as their term finishes, others may need. And I'm just going to give you one quick screenshot here of the kind of areas of this. If you look through all the kind of the ways to do it and what's the challenge, all those things, it kind of boils down to these 6 things. So what we have put into the draft that's gone to NIHR is recommendations that guidance focuses on how to do these things. So assessing the need, is it actually a need? So sometimes people will say it's a need, and actually if you look into it, someone else is already doing it. They haven't spoken to the sector. So is there really a need? Engagement PPI, absolutely crucial. It's been said already, that is phenomenally important to have that in from the outset, not just at the end. Looking at the goals, the what of impact, what actually is the line of sight, be it direct, or be it, if it's more fundamentally focused research, the kind of journey towards something. What resources do you need? What's the kind of the pathway? What are the barriers? All those kind of things. And what is that knowledge mobilization, communication, dissemination plan? So yes, it's far more nuanced than any single slide can say. But if you look at those things, and if I come down one screen, for each of those areas, we have a suite of kind of self-navigation screens that define what they are, explain what a stronger and weaker version looks like, defines it in terms of expectations of each program, because there are obviously some differences, and then looks at what the challenges of judging those things are, guiding questions, examples, etc. So it's a kind of here's the areas by which you could effectively judge impact. Here are some of the challenges. Now be free in your expert eye to go look. It's just some structure to bring to bear on that. Now, I said this was about towards healthier practice, and I'm just going to end with some, I think, principles I'd really urge you to bring into what you're doing, wherever you are in this, whether you're a researcher, a patient, a clinician, a commissioner, anything. One of the first things I'll say is this. I said the case studies, and I mean any case studies, but the ref case studies probably most so. Impact case studies are amazing for showing what we've done and what we've achieved, but they show the sausages, not the sausage factory. So if you're going to be impact literate, you need to be thinking about, and as Mark mentioned, the barriers, who's got more time to do things, who's those kind of things, because unless we actually get a grasp of who kind of what goes wrong, how have we assumed things, how have we misjudged it, as well as how have we done right, we're just going to repeat those things. So Sausage is not sausage factory. I will always urge people to chase meaning, not unicorns. What I mean is this: certainly in ref, we have had this kind of rhetoric that bigger is better, and we have to chase these big, shiny, far off, fantastical things, which I call impact unicorns. But that misses the direct benefits. And so much of what Mark was saying was chiming with me. We have such an opportunity to directly help people, to more immediately help people. They might not be world-changing things, but they're meaningful and important to those people in front of us. So the meaningfulness should come before the kind of stargazing, the fantastical stuff, which we might need for assessment, but I would hope doesn't skew us from a meaningful path. I've also said to identify your piece of the puzzle. I've said this a few times in this talk, that impact is a team sport. Much of the stories we have are about research making impact, but think about the amount of people involved in that. The best thing any of us can do in impact is work out what our contribution is, our piece of the puzzle, and do that as well as we can. So if you are involved in dissemination, maximize that. It's not impact, doesn't matter. You're disseminating to get impact. If you are a pre-award research manager, you are doing everything you can to get that impact potential on the road. Do what you can with your piece of the puzzle. I put on here building healthy environments. I won't go through this in huge detail, but if anyone's interested, there are obviously more links. One of the things I've witnessed a bit too much, unfortunately, is unhealthy practice across the sector, which is, people being told their work has no value because it has no impact, or being told the impact they've got isn't enough. And I've had, people crying with the messages they've been given from bosses and so forth, and it's wrong. Impact is impact. How we, judge what's better or worse is a different thing. If we've made a difference, we've made a difference. What we have on here is kind of the 5 C's of institutional health. And really, these are just a call for 5 things to look at in your institution, and there's a workbook to go through them about how committed your institution is. So does it have a strategy? And when I say institution, that might be your team, department, it might be your group, whatever it is. Is there a strategy? Is there capacity? Do people have the right competencies and skills? Are people clear? Is there clarity on what's supposed to happen and what you're driving towards? Connectivity, so the different bits of the institution, how well do they work together? And not finally in terms of importance, but on this slide, co-production, how strongly, substantially, meaningfully do you connect between the research world and the real world, the world where this lands? And I think we need to build impact literacy into the whole system. I've alluded to a few places where we can do that. Impact literacy should not be on the shoulders of one person or just an impact champion. People, Rebecca and her peers as impact champions are crucially important, and I in no way downplay that. I think that is a fantastic role, and they're doing it excellently. But they need to be linked into a community which is also growing. Our funders need to be impact literate, our publishers, our researchers, and so forth. So the more we can build these principles into the system, the better. And I think I'm going to end there. I mean, my contact details are there, but I just wanted to flavour your thinking with what impact literacy looks like, what some of the dynamics are in play, and how we could maybe make it better all round. So thank you.
Thank you, Julie. Great talk and giving this overview to make us think in a number of ways about impact and also what it isn't. So I would love to hear from the audience. Oh, yeah, no, Louise is clapping. Thank you, Louise. But any questions or comments for Julie?
Just to say while they're coming through, I see there's a thing about putting the links in the chat. While the next talk's on, I'll put the links to all those things in the chat for everybody. So I'll just do it after this.
Great. But I think Sabina and then Jayanti, I'll check with you for the name. Sabina first.
Just a very quick one. It's not probably really a question, more of a stressing the importance of with my academic side, hat on. I think one of the frustrating things, but you have mentioned that, the institutional literacy, institutional support, is the fact that sometimes, sort of as researchers, we really don't have the means of putting in practice, because as researchers, I think we can go and as far as thinking about impact but without that help, is almost impossible to have all of that knowledge. isn't it? So I just wanted you to stress a little bit, well, which you've done, but sort of how much more change do you think we need, basically? Where are we on the journey? Let's put it in there.
And the answer is it's a very varied picture. And I think the worst versions we have are where people are unsupported. The opposite, kind of almost opposite worst versions where people are so micromanaged to do it, and the support, it's like that's what you do. So there's somewhere healthy in the middle, and myself and colleagues are trying to do a hell of a lot in that space. So I mean, it's a much bigger answer than I can give in this thing. Feel free to drop me a line if you want to chat further. But I think the shortest answer is we have got a lot better. We're going into the next ref cycle, which is going to demand us to get better, but there's a lot of traditional mindsets to overturn in that space, and I won't pretend I don't feel that pain most days in my job. But if anyone wants to contact me about any of that, I should have said I set up the Lincoln Impact Literacy Institute to try and drive some of these in the sector. So if anyone wants to drop me a line on any of that, please do.
Thank you. Jayanti, do I pronounce your name correctly? Probably not, but over to you.
Thank you. Yes, no, that's perfect. Thank you. Just wanted to say thank you so much for the very wonderful presentation. I'm coming back to one of your comments about your presentation, that how well connected you are with the real world and the research world. And I don't know if you have ever worked in NHS and you understand the barriers of clinical research in the NHS. And just wanted to know if you had any kind of framework for the NHS. I know you have shown so much of documents and frameworks. My understanding is that's very much generic. Anything you have for the NHS managers or even chief exec to be shown or shared?
So a couple of things to say. The first thing is I'm working with an NHS site on doing something very similar. So I'm at the early stage of that. Well, I have a quick look to see if there's anything I've missed. The other thing I will say is this real world thing I use as a blunt statement to avoid people being able to look at kind of academic measures. So it is an academic centric term and it's intentionally blunt and it winds people up, but such is life, right? The thing to bring in, and I think I will try and look for, but we'll certainly bring into this NHS thing I'm doing, is that real world is staff, is patients, is systems. It's not just the patient. There's this whole set of important people and things in between those 2 points. And we've got some stuff on that. So I'll have a look, see what I can find in this, but something will be coming out as well at some point.
Thank you.
Is there any other question or comment on Julie's talk? No, not right now. Well, then I'll just really like to thank you, Julie, and we'll see you later on in the workshop again. I think we have another break, if I'm right about this. So we have actually 1 or 2 minutes spare. So if you are quick, you can even make yourself a sandwich or something like this, or get something to eat as it is all over lunchtime. So many thanks again to Julie, and see you again in around 10 minutes.